crazy. There we go. Good. Glad we're getting recorded here. Okay, so before I tell you more about myself, I want to actually put you in the shoes of the admissions committee. So you have a difficult choice to make between student A and student B. Here's what student A looks like. Student A has a 3.8 GPA. That's excellent. Student A has a 517 MCAT, also excellent. And the most notable extracurricular achievement of student A is that she shadowed a surgeon for 6 months. Student B has a 3.8, a 517, and their most notable extracurricular is that they lobbied the government of Guatemala to implement their findings on infant mortality, saving the lives of baby Guatemalans. Now you can only choose one. You can only choose A or B. Before you choose, let's take a look at the rest of their applications. So student A did shadowing for 6 months, had their own project, was the vice president of a pre-med club, did 200 hours of volunteering, and was a TA as an undergrad for 3 biology classes. Student B also had 200 hours of volunteering, was the founder of the Guatemala Club, which took undergrads at their college, sent them to Guatemala to perform public health research. As part of that, got on the floor of the Guatemalan Senate to talk to them about the findings of their organization and raised over $25,000 for saving lives in Guatemala. So you have to choose A or B. There is no both. Please type into the chat bar which one you would choose. How many would choose A? How many would choose B? I'm seeing all B's. And so the question is why, right? The question is why? Is it hard work? They both worked really darn hard to get their accomplishments. They're both equally intelligent, at least according to the grades and MCAT scores. So the question is, what is it that makes all of you except one choose student B? So I would propose that it's something along the lines of something called the failed simulation effect. This is coined by a very interesting author named Cal Newport. He says that things that are difficult to explain are more impressive than things that are simply hard to do. So it is hard to get a 3.8 and shadow a surgeon and do all the other extracurricular activities that student A had. But it's not hard to explain. If you want to go shadow a surgeon, go find a surgeon and follow him around for 6 months, right? If you want to lobby the government of Guatemala, the next step is unclear. Your brain cannot mentally recreate the steps that it took in order to get there. And as a result, student B seems more impressive. Now, both of these students got in. That's the good news. But if you want to get in, you essentially have a couple of options. You can either look like everybody else, or you can find a way to demonstrate your own unique journey and your own contribution to this world and it'll help you get in. So that's what I want to show you today. So my name is Rob Humbracht. For over 21 years, I have been helping students with applying to med school. I was a former MCAT tutor and trainer for a national MCAT company. That's how I got into this. My students were asking me for help with their essays, and my boss kicked me out. She said, you have to start a company. And that's how Passport Admissions was born back in 2007. So Passport these days, we work with about 100 students applying to med school and PA school and dental school and other pre-health occupations. The application for med school comes out on Thursday, so I am burning the candle at both ends right now. But it's really a pleasure for me to be here presenting for you guys. The other thing that I have done is I've created something called the Savvy PreMed. The Savvy PreMed is, we hope, the best, most informative, most unique blog on med school admissions. We've been writing that blog for almost 8 years now. And if you go to the homepage, you can actually see the world's first free medical school search. And then the final thing that I've been up to, because apparently running 2 organizations is not enough, I've also started an organization called Heal Clinical Shadowing Network, which offers free shadowing every Wednesday night. It's virtual. We use real patient cases, and you guys are all cordially invited to join us. So let me quickly show you. I wanted to show you just so you had a sense. This is Passport Admissions. You're cordially invited to meet with us for free. If you'd like to sit down and talk about your chances of getting in and what help you might need, we'd love to meet with you. It's an hour of our time for free. Please take us up on that. Savvy PreMed is a blog and a search tool. It's free. You can sign in and save your favorites. The #1 medical school, according to our rankings, is your alma mater, UCLA. So you can go and check out all this great information. If you click on each school, it'll show you all this information. Again, totally for free, including essay topics, all that kind of good stuff. And then finally is clinicalshadowing.com. If you want to come Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, we will have a preceptor guiding you through real patient cases. That's every Wednesday, has been happening since September, and it's a great way of building your clinical experience for pre-health schools. But let's talk about our agenda for this evening. So we're going to talk about how to build your narrative. If you don't know what that is, I'll explain it. We'll talk about how to make a project that makes med schools say, wow, this is a little corny. It's a little corny to say, wow, but it's true, right? If you want to be somebody like student B and not like student A, I'm going to give you a roadmap. Now, it's up to you whether you want to follow that. And finally, we're going to put it all back together where you'll get a chance to be the admissions committee and choose which candidates get an interview. I think that's probably the most educational part of this evening's presentation. So I hope you guys will stick around. But you guys are cordially invited to a free session with Passport, to a free session with Heal. And I wanted to share that link with you right now, should you feel so inclined. Let me copy and paste that sucker in. Here is the link to the jot form for that invitation. So if you guys are eager to go ahead and get invited, we will send you an email inviting you to meet with us, and you can schedule your time. If you'd like to attend the Heal session on Wednesday, also check that box. And of course, if you don't check any boxes, you'll never hear from us again. All right. So where do you even begin with getting extracurricular experience? That's the most common question. I don't even know where to start. Or maybe you started and you're feeling like you're just running in sand because there's so much to do and you just don't feel like you're really getting anywhere. Well, I think the first way to think about this is there's no one path that's right for every pre-health student. So we start by saying, let's help you build your narrative. What is your narrative? It's your story of who you are in language that the admissions office can understand. So the best way of understanding your narrative is to look at all of the concentric circles of admissions. So this is adapted from a published scholarly article in the New England Journal of Medicine that talks about holistic admissions. In a nutshell, holistic admissions just says, we consider everything about you when you apply to med school or apply to pre-health school. So it starts with what you probably know about, which are the metrics. And so without those metrics, the rest of this doesn't really matter. There's certain minimums that you have to meet. It varies by school and by a program that you're applying to. So those metrics would be, again, very simplified: grades, your MCAT score or other test score, and then the trend in your grades. So it is true that a GPA with an upward trend is much better than a GPA that is either flat or down. It is also true that a higher GPA is better, but again, only to an extent, because the metrics are the centerpiece of this, but it's not the only thing that matters. So the next circle would be your personal strengths. So this varies from person to person, whatever those personal strengths might be. And so some of those might not just be your strengths. The story of you could also include your ethnicity or your gender or any unique perspectives on life that you have. It looks at things like your level of empathy and how you've demonstrated that. Your intellectual curiosity, of course, is important for wanting to go into healthcare, your maturity, and then just broadly speaking, your core values. So all of this forms your narrative. This is who you are, and it's centered on these numbers that you've achieved. And so there might even be a connection between those numbers. So for example, a lot of students start college with sort of a meh GPA, but then they figure out their passion. They say, oh, wow, I really want to pursue medicine for this reason, or some class ignites their interest, and all of a sudden their grades grow up. So you could imagine a line that connects this center metric to your curiosity. So then there's another concentric circle, of course, which is, for lack of a better word, the evidence of the things that you've done. So this could be evidence of your readiness to practice healthcare. It could be your healthcare experience, your community service, your leadership, your distance traveled, the interpersonal skills, your research, your cultural competency. All of the things that you've done should be evidence of who you are. So There's a couple of ways of thinking about this. Number one, if you're doing something that just doesn't seem to matter to who you are, well, it's probably not helping you get in. You know, the quintessential example is answering the phone at a local hospital, or filing paperwork. Yeah, technically that's clinical, but it's not actually showing who you are to the admissions office. So it's not helping you with showing your narrative or telling your story. Also, there's a wide variety of quality in these different types of experiences that are shown. So it's not that all community service is created equal. Some of them are demonstration of your core values. I'll give you an example. I've been reading a lot of applications this week, a lot. Oh my gosh. And so it's just not that cool if you threw a party with all your friends for a good cause. Listen, it's great you raised a couple $100, maybe even a couple $1,000, but what you did was just party with your friends. That to me is not evidence of your core values, or if it is, it's evidence of not the core values we're looking for in admissions. The opposite of that would be an organization that at least existed at UCLA before COVID. And that organization would be the one that washes the feet of the homeless. I can't quite remember the name of it off the top of my head, but the point of that organization was you would go through and do really unglamorous work, but you're talking to someone who's so different from you. And the happy feet, there we go, thank you, Amy. And you're getting somebody's story and you're really hearing them. And it's one of those things where the stories that you tell from that experience do reflect the kind of person that you are. That kind of experience changes you for the better. And so as a result, that's much more reflective of your narrative. So what we're looking for are to draw lines between the different circles that connect who you are with what you've done. And you don't have to have every single thing on these circles. You don't need to do that to get into med school. Some people, their identity matters a lot more to them, or some people, their certain activities matter a lot more to them than others. But this is the way that you strategically build your narrative. You start by thinking, okay, what matters to me that I want to then show and try to achieve something in. Cool. Yay, Happy Feet. I'm glad to hear Happy Feet is still around. I figured it would come back post-COVID. And so that's great. All right, so how do you actually choose these activities? Oh, Nandini, that's a great question. And I'm happy to, part of the beauty, guys, of this format is we can actually interact with each other. So distance traveled. Distance traveled is admissions speak for disadvantage. Admissions, they do a really good job of not just considering the color of your skin or some sort of just what box you check. Admissions offices really want to know what your reality has been like from over your life. So a good example was we had a student at Passport this last year who spent about a year and a half in high school living out of their car. And so it's frankly amazing that student was able to get any kind of education in high school when living out of their car, and that they were able to go to college and get good grades is even more amazing. So that student's GPA is considered in the context of their distance traveled. Yes, so it's a way of understanding achievement in light of opportunity given. All right, so good question. You're welcome, I'm happy to explain. Yeah, so let's talk about how you choose activities. So first off, don't overwhelm yourself, because if you remember that center concentric circle, your grades are the most important thing. And so we don't want activities to detract from those grades. We want the activities to support those grades. You should be involved in things that really lift you up. You should be involved in things that is like the right level of stress, not too much, not too little, that you start slacking off. And so it's about finding good quality experiences, not quantity. Now, if you're just a freshman, you might have to try out a bunch of different clubs to really find the ones that you are that are high quality for you. Indeed, I've been doing this so long, I've talked to student organizations over the years, and so the quality often depends on the people running the organization, which change every year. So you're trying to find the ones that are quality for you. The second is you should plan to take a gap year. That's a little controversial, certainly something parents don't love. They start to think about your life getting off track, but you have a long life ahead of you. And yes, healthcare careers take a lot of training and dedication, but there's just not an easy way to get all of the things that you need into the 4-year experience and apply right away. So just as an example, if you are not taking a gap year and you're applying to med school, you need to be ready to apply by June after your 3rd year, which means the ideal time to take your MCAT is September after sophomore year, after your 2nd year, which means you have to have all your prerequisites completed by spring of sophomore year. And so that just is, that already is hard enough for most people. And so the solution, if you come away from my presentation and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even know how I'm gonna get it all in, this is the answer. You might need just a little more time. Now, you don't have to take a gap year. If you've known you wanted to be a doctor since you were 6, you took all the AP classes in high school, and you started day 1 at UCLA, and you're like, I know this is what I want to do, then okay, no worries. You probably are on path. You should be okay. But if you've had any hesitation or any trouble along that path, it is ideal to take a gap year. The average age for starting med school is 24, so gap years are actually good. They're actually good things for med schools to see. All right, and then finally, the final piece of basic advice would just be, if your heart isn't in something, quit. Because there's a word called opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is a fancy economics phrase that means the cost of being engaged in one activity actually prevents you from doing something that could be more meaningful for your application and for your life. So understand that things that you think you're supposed to be doing probably aren't doing as much for you as you think. A great example is research. We have students, so opportunity cost is the loss of potential gain from other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. So we have students who love doing research, and if they want to spend the rest of their life doing it, if they want it to be a part of their career, if they really enjoy the process of being alone in a lab and just honing in and trying to get results, then keep going. But if you don't love it and you don't want to spend your life doing it, then you're investing hundreds of hours in something that isn't helping you get in. And so that is the wasted opportunity cost. Those hundreds of hours could be spent on something that's much better for your application and for you and your well-being. All right, so let's see. So how do you stand out? So before we talk about how to stand out, the first thing I need to say is you may already stand out. I will never forget my first presentation for UCLA a couple years back. It was, of course, live and in person on campus. And after the presentation, I had somebody come up to me who was concerned that she didn't stand out because she hadn't done any of these capstone projects that we're going to talk about in just a second. Well, turns out she had immigrated to the United States by herself. She was working 3 jobs to put herself through UCLA and send money back to her mother in a 3rd world country. And she was wondering why she didn't stand out. So if you are the first in your family to go to college, if you have overcome significant obstacles on this path, you may already stand out. And that's great. You don't need to worry about standing out anymore, right? You go back to our concentric circles and identify, okay, there's these things that I have that not everybody else has experienced in life, then fantastic. You have permission to ignore the rest of my presentation. This methodology, this capstone research, is for those of you, though, that feel the opposite. I can't tell you how many times over the last 21 years, students have come to my office and said, hey, I just feel like I don't stand out compared to everybody else, or they're anxious about it, they're concerned. So this is a blueprint. So a capstone is it literally is the stone at the top of an arch that holds the whole thing together. I, of course, borrowed this term from engineering. Engineering students at the end of their 4-year career have a capstone that kind of puts together their learning from all 4 years of their undergraduate. And so I would propose the idea of a pre-med capstone. So what is a pre-med capstone? Well, you can imagine 3 overlapping circles. So in one goes a problem to solve. You need to figure out some large problem that has sufficient scope that you want to try to take a crack at. The second is you think about, okay, what are the strengths that you have as a human being? And what are the resources that you have access to? So strengths would be, are you a people person? Are you good with technology? Are you creative and artistic? What is it that's going to yield the best result if you really go all in on your strengths? Like, yeah, okay. So, and then the resources would be, okay, do you have access to an organization where there are a lot of people who need volunteering hours? Do you have a large group of friends that you could potentially recruit? Do you know a lot of other pre-health students that might want to co-found something with you so that you're not doing this all alone? Those are all resources. And then the final piece is you have to innovate. So it has to be something that's different than med schools have ever heard before. Maybe not ever, but just out of the ordinary. So I love those clubs that tutor elementary school kids in science, but I've read about that in pretty much every application I've ever seen. And so there's like certain activities, the mission trip to teach people how to brush their teeth in Peru. There's just certain ones that are so overdone that it's really hard for that to be innovative. So what do I mean when I'm talking about a capstone? Well, before we talk about steps, let me give you an example. There was a UCSD grad a couple years back who, when he graduated, he had basically kind of the average for students applying to med school. It was like a 3.68 GPA, good in CAT. It wasn't great, 5.12, something like that. I had done a little bit of volunteering, a little shadowing, a little leadership, a little research. By the time he applied to med school, he was the founder of a nonprofit organization that teaches Alzheimer's patients to swim. And so that's the kind of thing that makes med school say, wow, right? It's different. It sounds hard to do. It's like a big problem to try to solve. And it builds on his strengths and resources. It leaves a legacy. So how did he do it? Well, first is he had to found the organization. So it wasn't very glamorous. He had to drop off flyers at nursing homes for weeks and weeks and weeks to get his first people to come visit in the pool. He had to find a problem to solve. Turns out his grandfather, who lives in China, had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that was the problem that he wanted to solve. He also was a swim coach for his high school swim team. So he already had a lot of knowledge of the pool, and that's how he combined those two ideas into this one. And then that was the innovative part, was the combination of those two. And so that's how you start. And then eventually he recruited his friends to also be instructors, built a beautiful website, and then has himself an organization there. So that's what a capstone looks like. So let's talk about possible capstones. So here is where you're going to put into the chat whether you think these are good capstones. So we're going to evaluate them on three things: whether they have sufficient scope, do they solve, is it a big enough capstone, whether it solves an actual problem, and then whether it's innovative enough. So the first one we're going to evaluate is you create a recycling program for your dorm. So yes or no, is that a good capstone? Type it into the chat. Starting to see some responses. This isn't a perfect science. Yeah, Amy, you're onto it. You're onto it. It does solve a big problem, right? Recycling is very important. But it's not innovative enough. Recycling has been kind of done. It's something that we as a society have already tried to accomplish. Whether we've done so or not, So just creating that program is not enough to say, wow. Let's try another one. You created a music therapy program at a local hospital. Is that a good capstone project? Yes or no? All right, you guys are onto it. Why do you think it is a good one? Anybody want to venture a guess? Why is this a good capstone project? It checks all the boxes. Yeah. Unique. Yeah. Capstone projects don't have to relate to healthcare. That's optional. This was a real former student of ours as well. He basically one day brought his guitar into volunteering at the hospital. He became the most popular volunteer in the history of that program because the healthcare providers were just grabbing him, pulling him from room to room. No play for my patient, no play for my patient, no play for my patient. And so he thought, wow, they really need musicians. So he just connected it as a pipeline. He said, okay, he went to the music school at the music department at his school and promoted the opportunity. And then several of his friends and then other music majors all volunteered, and they would just take turns going and playing at the hospital. And so it became, it wasn't just playing at the hospital. Also, he somehow connected that to the the occupational therapists and that department of the hospital, which is super cool. All right, last one is master polyphasic sleep. So if you don't know what this is, there is an old Seinfeld episode about it. What it is you sleep 20 minutes for every 3 hours. So most of us need about a 7-8 hour night of sleep. If you sleep 20 minutes every 3 hours over the course of a day, that's 8 times 20, which is something like 160 minutes. So you can get just as much rest by sleeping only 3 hours and 10 minutes. Yes, and so there is literature on this. You can Google this if you want. Is that a good capstone project? Yes or no? You seem a little divided on this one. It would be amazing. The problem here is the scope is not big enough, right? It's just you mastering something yourself. It's a little weird, I mean, maybe there's an application there when you get into graduate school or medical school, but it's not enough to just do something for you. It's about also doing something that makes an impact on others. All right. Yeah, it doesn't really solve a problem. Good thought there, Shin-Young. Okay, so let's put it all back together. So you guys now get to be the admissions committee. Now, when I read a full med school application, it takes me a solid 30 minutes, 20 minutes to really read the different parts and understand the nuances and complexity of each person. And so that is partly how admissions works, but admissions also works at a much more simple level. Med schools are trying to do a couple of things. So the first thing they're trying to do is they're trying to manage the academics. So they can't accept somebody if they don't think they're going to succeed. And the lower the GPA and MCAT, the more risky the candidate is. So they're on average, they're trying to get those numbers to be as high as possible because those students are much more likely to succeed in med school and pass the USMLE. So the first thing we're going to know about our student is their GPA. So I boiled this down to utter simplicity. So we'll just get the GPA. So this student is a 3.9. So med schools are trying to maximize the GPA, and you are too for your admissions committee. The second is you get to know the student's status. So if there's any kind of special status, so this student is from an underserved community, and that's the blanket term that I'm using here just to simplify things. So they either are from a group that has too few doctors in this country, or maybe they grew up in a rural area, or have some other thing that would give them priority for getting in. And then the final thing that you get to learn is the distinctiveness of the applicant. So the most distinct thing about student one is they have a helicopter pilot's license. And so you have to consider, do we give this person an interview? Now, there's 10 total of these. You can only give out 5 interviews. So I want you to take some notes and you think about which of these 10 candidates you would interview. That's student one. So student two has a 3.7 GPA, also from an underserved community. And the most unique thing about them is they helped their grandmother through cancer and recovery. Student 3 has a 3.3 GPA, also is from an underserved community. And the most distinctive thing about them is they worked as a nurse for 9 years. Student 4 has a 3.9 GPA. Now, they are not from an underserved community, but they have ties to your medical school. Their grandfather donated a building to your school. So take that for what it's worth. And so the most distinctive thing about this student is that they were the vice president of a pre-health organization. Student 5 has a 3.5 GPA. They are the son of a med school professor at your school. So if you reject them, that professor might be a little peeved if you don't at least give them an interview. The most distinctive thing about them is that they have a double major in psychology and biology. Student 6 has a 3.9 GPA. There's no special status here. They are not, they don't have any ties to your school, and they're not from an underserved community. But the most distinct thing about them is they spent 2 years in the Peace Corps teaching nutrition and health in Madagascar. Student 7 has a 3.9 GPA. No special status, but the distinction is they speak Spanish, English, and Hindi fluently. Student 8 has a 3.7 GPA. And the distinction is they immigrated to the United States from Taiwan at age 8. That's the most unique thing about them. Student 9 has a 3.5 GPA. The most distinctive thing about them is they were a 4-year starting punter on a Division I football team. And finally, student 10 has a 3.3 GPA. The most distinct thing about them is they are a first author on a published research paper. So here are your 10 candidates. As a reminder, you can only pick 5. You're trying to maximize the GPA of your incoming class. You're trying to maximize the number of underserved and students with ties. And you're trying to maximize the distinctiveness of the class as judged by you. So to help with this, we're going to use a poll. I've got a Google form here for you that will show me the results here. Ooh, let's see. Let me make sure I can do this. Just a second. Here is, I need to go to preview. Here's the form. Here it is in the chat. So when you are ready to vote, check off the 5 that you would choose to interview. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to put up that slide again so you guys can see it. Just a second. I got to click through. Here we go. If you have any questions, about the candidates, you can go ahead and ping me in the. You can put those into the Slack, into the chat. But take about a minute to figure out which 5 you'd choose. And Amy, that's right. It's supposed to be hard. This is part of the difficulty of admissions. Shin-Young, that's correct. 6 through 10 have no special status. They are not underserved, and they haven't donated a building to your med school. Here we go. I'll share the results when we're done. It'll be fun to see who gets accepted and who doesn't. All right, they've got 11 responses so far. Go ahead and Anton, this is being recorded and we will send it out. All right, last call for responses. Any more? All right, so this is pretty interesting. Looks like we've got 15 responses, and I'll go in order of the most popular. So the student that almost everybody chose to accept, with 14 out of 15 choosing to interview him, was student 6. So my question to you guys is why? What was so impressive about student 6? Yeah, Nikita says it's unique. I agree. So good GPA and unique and large impact on others. I agree with that. Yep. Well said, Daisy. Yep. Managed a lot of time in service and stellar academics, almost perfect GPA and demonstrated humanitarianism. Well said, Nicole. Yep. Cool. That's right, Amy. That's right. I mean, this is sort of a capstone project, right? Peace Corps is something that it's like there's a paved road there. You can choose to go into the Peace Corps or not. So it's not like you having to do it yourself, but it sure is a perspective that you'll bring to the incoming class at a med school. And so almost all med schools see this. You don't have to go abroad to do this either. You can do AmeriCorps or Teach for America. There are ways of. One of my students. Spent a year living with foster kids like age 2 to 6, and so there was like 6 foster kids in the house, and she had to do everything except pay for stuff. She had to like change their diapers and educate them and make sure they were safe and all that stuff. I mean, it was a crazy experience. So there's lots of ways that you can give of yourself to needy people in a way that's meaningful and really will show it for med schools. All right, so that was by far and away the most popular choice. Second is student 2. So you guys were really moved by helping their grandmother through cancer and recovery. And so what I would say about student 2 is there's a lot of people who write in their applications to health profession school that the reason they became a healthcare provider was when somebody in their family got sick. And so there's two versions of that story. There's the version of that story where you're too young to help, and so you watch helplessly as somebody gets sick and it's really hard, which that version is a little bit on the cliche side. It's just that we don't learn much about you from that story. And then there's the version where you are going to the doctor's appointments and you are translating for that grandparent and you are helping them with their medications and you are watching your younger siblings while your parents take care of this person, or whatever that version is for you. And so that could be a really meaningful distinction. And so it sounds like you guys were moved by it, which is good. The next most popular was student 4. So you guys did bow to the economic reality of somebody who donated a building to your school. And that is also true. Why did I include this? Because there's not that many people whose grandfathers have donated buildings to schools. The reason I included it is because there are people with ties that are totally unfair and that are completely out of your control. So it is certainly possible that you don't get an interview and you're wondering why on earth, because everything would point that you're qualified. And the answer is just there are other people with things that you can't imagine that are getting in ahead of you for various reasons. So this is one of those examples. By contrast, one of the least popular choices here today was number 5. So you guys were willing to take on maybe one of those 2 students, but not both. So that makes sense. Let's see, other popular ones was number 1. They got that was, a 3.9 despite being from an underserved organization. That's pretty good. Number 3 got a lot of love. So working as a nurse for 9 years, you can imagine how that would add to the education of the incoming class. Let's see. You guys were a little bit, mixed here. So student, they're sort of equal popularity. I can put up the poll. Let me see if, can you guys see my screen right now? Can you see the poll? Okay, cool. Yeah, so now that we know who they are, so really not a ton of love for student 7 or student 9 or student 10. And so the reason I mentioned that, so about a third of you guys chose to do each one. So student 7, it is common for students to list 3 languages on their application. That happens a lot. What I usually see is native in one, maybe advanced or fair in another, and then basic in a third. But so to be fully fluent in 3 languages is pretty good. They're specifically for California med schools, they are looking for Spanish speakers. So it's great to be fluent in Spanish if you want to stay in this state for med school. If you think about it, how are you going to serve half of our patients if you don't speak their language? You either relying on an interpreter, which means you get to spend half the amount of time with them, or you are relying on your own broken Spanish, and there's always the chance for not being able to serve them as well as a doctor. Student 8 is one of those students where they have done nothing wrong in their life. They got good grades. They did all of the checklists and all the basic things you're supposed to do, and yet very few of you chose to interview student 8. Student 9 actually will get a lot more love than you'd expect. Getting a 3.5 while being a competitive full-time athlete is a very difficult thing. And so med schools love it when people have demonstrated excellence at the highest levels in whatever the extracurricular, whether that's athletics or music or art or theater. And so if you are competing at an elite level, that's something that actually will help you get into graduate school. And then the research is a little bit varied by school. Some schools are very research oriented, others aren't. So for the ones that are, they measure your research orientation by your dedication to it, by whether you've had your own project, by how good the letter of recommendation from your PI is, and of course, by your publications. So all of those things kind of go in. All righty, so I want to really fast just quickly re-invite you guys to a couple things. The first would be, if you guys would like to meet with us at Passport Admissions, you're welcome to. It's a free hour of our time. What we do is we go through, where you are at in your application journey. So how the grades have been and the extracurriculars and all that kind of stuff. We figure out what your goals are and then what you need to work on over the coming months, years, in order to achieve those goals. And if there's anything we can do to help you, we'll tell you. But if there's not, then we wish you your best. So check that first box if you would like that. And then the second box is if you would like to come to a free hour-long clinical shadowing night. It's every Wednesday. We have real patient cases where you get to see the patient-doctor interaction, and you get to come to a diagnosis with the rest of the group. It's a lot of fun. So if you guys would like to join us in that, check that bottom box, and I'll send you an invitation to that. All right. Yeah, and the free advising session, Shin-Young, is one-on-one. It's all one-on-one. So if you would like to, you guys can fill out that invitation. And then I would love to stick around to answer your questions. So if you guys would like to stick around and answer some questions, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'll be happy to do so. I can cover anything you'd like. But if you need to go because it's a busy time of year, I will totally understand.
Well, before I stop my recording, I just want to thank everybody for being here. Rob, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation all over again. So I'm going to stop the recording and you guys can ask questions.